similar to what you would see with like a NextJS. And I've been using these tools in their beta versions and I've had a great experience so far. If you'd like to learn more, we have a QR code posted out on some screens out throughout the cafeteria. So give those a scan. We're going to be sending out, we're going to be getting a developer newsletter started, hopefully in either August or September, where you can go on and create a sandbox account and just start playing around and building. And we also, as they mentioned, we have one of the topic tables out there where I'll be standing and we'll have a couple of our engineers just talking about Yext and the challenges that our engineers are facing here, the problems they're solving. So thanks again for attending. I am going to have Joe from recruiting come up real quick and just say hi. Joe, if you're... Yeah, me. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. I wrote down some notes. So yeah, my name is Joe Pecci. I'm a senior manager of recruiting here at Yext. We do have full stack engineer roles open. We have a lot of them. So if you're interested in those, you can look at our career page. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Joe Pecci. It's Pecci. I think that's it for me, really. So I'll be here in the back too if you want to stop by and talk about Yext.
Thanks everyone for attending again. Looking forward to the talks.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Yeah, I can't thank Yext enough. I literally reached out to them just, what was it, 2 weeks ago? Like this meetup came together so fast and they pulled through so well for us. I mean, look at this space. This is just incredible. So can we have another round of applause for Yext? Super appreciative, helping us bring back in-person meetups. We cannot do these without you. But without further ado, what do you say we get into our talks, Donovan?
Sure, let's bring up our first speaker.
All right, if our first speaker can come up and start to get set up. He is a senior software engineer at Everlane, and he's coming up here to talk about modernizing a legacy code base. So please join me in welcoming Nawaz Khan.
Okay, let me get this setup going. Okay. Hey guys, how are you? I'm so thrilled to be here tonight and just see people who are outside of Zoom. So I'm like so super happy about it. So my name is Nawaz Khan and my topic is about modernizing a legacy monolithic code base with baby steps. Okay. And this is one of my favorite topics to talk about because I've dealt with it in pretty much like all the companies that I've worked at in the past 9 years. And since then, JavaScript has evolved so much. So it's like really cool to see like how far we have come and what kind of tools that are out there that we can use to make our lives easier as developers and give users like best user experience. So as I was saying, my name is Nawaz Khan. I'm a senior engineer at Everlane. Just a show of hands, like how many of you know Everlane? Okay, cool. And how many of you have used our website to buy clothing? Oh, one person. Two fashionable people here. So this is a picture of me as an early teenager. As you can see, I'm like embracing the modern basics look that Everlane currently has. And this is a picture of me from our Williamsburg store. So I just moved from San Francisco to New York. And the first thing I realized was everybody here is like effortlessly fashionable. So I had to stop by at our store to buy some new clothes. Okay. Jumping into our topic. So just to know, like, has anybody like worked on a legacy code base before and had an opportunity to revamp it? Okay, a few people. Cool. So For those who don't know, a monolithic architecture is something where all your application code lives in one repository, and every deploy we run basically runs both like front end, back end, all the test suites associated with it. And no matter what our pull request holds, it still runs like, both those code bases. So the thing is, there's nothing wrong with it. Everlane actually started as an online company back in 2010. And the easiest thing to do when you're starting something is spin up an app server, put some UI code, backend code, make the data work between them, which makes sense, actually. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, as the years go by and as we add more features to the existing tech stack, the code base just becomes so complex. And this is, I'm talking about from 2010. So there was no React back then. So we were like dealing with some really bare bones JavaScript. So I joined at Everlane in 2019, around the end of the year. And the monolithic app basically had like two different layers. Like one is the front-end code base had jQuery, React.js, Redux, CoffeeScript, Backbone, all those things combined. And we had like two different folders. One is for our mobile code base, and one is for the desktop code base. And the backend was basically on Ruby on Rails. So every time a request comes in, the application controller on the Ruby on Rails decides which app to like give back the user, whether it's like the mobile app or the desktop app based on the viewport width. And we still do our deployment using Heroku, and the database we still use is MySQL. And this is something we added around the end of 2019 or early 2020. We were in talks with Cloudflare and Fastly to pick which CDN or edge service that we should use. And we went with Cloudflare because it gave us more flexibility in terms of adding programmable logic to the edge. So that was like really cool. It's called Cloudflare Workers. And so around that time, as a new developer at the company, I was given a task to build a new checkout feature. So, but there were like a lot of challenges in that journey. So we had like tech debt piled up for almost like 10 years now. And the code was like super complex, nested, and full of side effects. So it was like very hard to just like launch a new feature without being confident that there are no bugs. And the code was also verbose. And we had to like write so much code just to like build something simple. And like I said, multiple frameworks coexisted. So you had to like understand pretty much everything, and no hooks. So this is like, we are talking about early 2020. I think hooks actually were launched in February 2019. So we did not have hooks. We were still using the class-based components that React provided us. I cannot imagine without hooks, a code base existing right now. So the deployment times were like longer, and the Web Vital score that we had was around like 5 seconds or so, which is not great. So developing a new feature was something like this. Like you just have to like really get into your mind palace. So we actually were thinking about some migration strategies. So how can we change our existing legacy code base, and how can we migrate, right? So the first thing we thought about was like, okay, how about like rebuilding the whole code base from scratch? The thing is, it's not ideal, and there are like so many use cases, especially a big e-commerce code base. It's very easy to like miss some use cases, and it's very hard to like get approval from stakeholders to just do all these things, which is like not ideal. And the second thing is to stop and refactor, like stop just like building features and just like refactor what we have. The thing is, the engineers before already had tried this. This is one of the reasons why we had like multiple frameworks in the UI that existed in the first place. So we had like Backbone, We had like CoffeeScript, we had React, Redux, and all those things. So this clearly didn't work. So we had to like think about something else, which was to rebuild something incrementally and to take a step outside of the monolith and build something. So that's exactly what we did. So we started like gauging our, we started gauging our high impact pages and just focus on our mobile traffic. So these are some new designs that we came up with. And we also got our stakeholder approval because we put a case together stating all the complexities that we currently had, the amount of time it took, the core web vital scores and all those things. So luckily we got the approval, we convinced them, and we rehauled our designs, and we actually like rehaul our home, collection, and product pages. But to be honest, like if anybody else wants to do this, you can just stick with like one page, like any one particular thing that we want to like rehaul. And we did that for only for our mobile pages. And one of our goals was to improve our user experience. So the design team helped us out in that, and to improve our core web vital score and the page load performance, and build an architecture which is backend agnostic. And GraphQL was like super hot back then, and we really wanted to like adopt that as developers to make our lives easier in terms of building components and having them very close to what data that they need, and just like fetch those data and have a better code organization. So before we revamped our architecture, this is how it pretty much looked like. So the browser sends a request, like in this case for a collection page, it goes through Cloudflare, hits the monolith. The monolithic app sends us back the HTML. The React loads in the browser, like hydrates, and basically we do the REST API calls and get the data back from the monolith, right? So in the next, like for the after version, we kind of spun up two different servers. One for the web server, which is running NextJS. Another one was for an Apollo GraphQL server dedicated only for like fetching all the data. And in this case, the request goes from the browser through Cloudflare and through the workers, it hits the Next.js server, and the Next.js server basically responds back with HTML, and the React basically loads on the browser, and we basically use GraphQL to request data from our Apollo GraphQL server in this case. And that particular server gets the data from the monolith, and the monolith basically sends, like Apollo GraphQL basically sends back the GraphQL response to the browser. So each server has a specific purpose. The first one is Next.js. The second one is the GraphQL server, which is basically like collecting all our data from the monolith. So how did all this start? It all started with a prototype. So the first one is we already have our monolithic app server which basically was providing us with all the REST endpoints. And we added this Apollo GraphQL layer for like fetching all the data. And we added another server, which is Next.js and Apollo. This one is Apollo client. That one is Apollo GraphQL server. And we made this work in our local dev setup to begin with, and made sure this is like running fine. And we basically chose Next.js because we already knew React, and it was under the hood, and came with like handy build metrics, and mainly their flexible rendering strategies, like SSR and client-side rendering. And later on, they also like added the static site generation and whatnot, and a vibrant community. And the code structure that they provided was exactly like what we were looking for in terms of like gathering all our component codes, the context, libraries, and the pages, all those things. So we went with Apollo because we had a client. It basically provided us with a UI client for fetching GraphQL data and also spinning up a new GraphQL server. So we started setting up a GraphQL schema that we need for our pages. For example, data modeling collection pages and product pages, and connected with the existing REST API. And the Apollo client also came with like client-side like caching strategies, like only from cache, like network only, and all those options. And it was like easy for us to like get rid of Redux, since we didn't have to like get all the data and massage it in the Redux layer and then feed it to the components. So we didn't have to do any of that. So that was like super cool. And the inbuilt options that we also got were like query optimizations and refetching something when a component needs data. So let's look at some code. So we started with the data modeling layer on the Apollo GraphQL server. So we spun up the server, and we connected with a data source, which was the REST API with like Everlane. And this is an example of fetching a cart related data. As you can see, there is a extend like query here, which basically gets the cart ID and responds back with information over here with the type defs. Like, so we basically modeled the query, the response that is associated with the query, like line item, summary, item count. And this server basically calls the monolithic like server for its data. And we spun this one up first. And this is how it looks like. So the get cart call here basically goes and fetches the cart data. And we basically like create the response object that is needed. And that is basically returned by this particular function. And we also added a Redis cache to service all the GraphQL requests, so that anytime a request comes to the GraphQL server, if it is already in the Redis cache, it basically gives it back from that layer instead of going all the way to the monolithic app. And we added some tags for our cache control. This was like as easy as this. And on the UI side, which is the NextJS side of things, so we used Apollo client, which was like easier to adopt and also communicate with the GraphQL server. So we started creating custom hooks. In this case, for collecting the cart related information, we created a hook called useCart, which basically is a nested hook, if you can see like the use. So it's basically calling a session and getting the data. And basically it's using that data to get the cart information over here. And so now this custom hook basically returns the cart data, and if the data is still loading and those kind of states. And the GraphQL query on the client side kind of looks like that, where we are passing in the cart ID that is required for getting the data back. And in the component side, like for example here, we have a cart link component. So it was as easy as adopting use cart and just getting the data back. So since we started this project as a small thing for our only for our mobile traffic, and since it was a new project, we wanted to make sure from the get-go that we had clean coding practices. And so we used Husky and Git hooks and added some linters like ESLint, StyleLint, and automated it so that every time someone commits a code, they actually see that, okay, some things are wrong with your code, so please correct it. This was like very important from the get-go. The next one was keeping an eye on performance was why we even like started this project to begin with. And Next basically like came up with like dynamically like fetching components, dynamically fetching like packages and all those things. So we basically embraced the component side of things using Next dynamic so that the initial first like page load does not have this component when the page loads. And the same thing applies for packages that are not required when the page is loading. And some of the things like intersection observers for components that are still not in the viewport, and some images that are not there in the viewport, which we don't need to render. And so these kind of like build metrics were super handy to understand what is the size of the first load when a particular page was getting rendered. So we were like keeping an eye on this. So let's take a look at the Cloudflare workers. So Cloudflare is a platform which provides us with CDN, like edge programming, and firewall and all those kind of things. And we basically use Cloudflare as a reverse proxy to route the incoming traffic to our newly created servers. One is NextJS, another one is the Apollo GraphQL server. So we were using that. So some of the paths, so we basically had like few paths, and if the path matches, and if it is a Next.js asset, we basically detect that on the edge level. And if the incoming request is from a mobile device, so we can also like check it over here that, okay, the device type is mobile. So now we know that, okay, the incoming request is requesting, let's say, a collection page and a mobile device. In that case, we can send that request to our newly created host server. And if it does not like apply, if it is like a desktop, since we didn't rehaul the desktop to begin with, it is basically sent back to the existing monolithic server. So this is how we programmed it at the edge. And it's basically an event-based model, like in Cloudflare, and also it was JavaScript. So it was like super easy for us to like adopt that too. And when we rolled it out gradually with a Cloudflare environment variable. And we were like slowly increasing the traffic to make sure everything is working fine. And we rolled it out to 100% eventually. And we used some handy performance management tools to take a look at, okay, how we are performing for getting a sense of the RUM data, which is the real user metrics. So we used speed curve, like mainly speed curve, to like get a sense of like how our real users are seeing our site in terms of LCP and all those things. And we use like Chrome Profiler, the Next.js, build metrics, those kind of things to see how we are doing. And this was basically from Black Friday. So that is when we usually get the most amount of traffic to our site. And pretty much 45% of our traffic was served in the new stack that we created. And the LCP before was around like 4.8. And the largest contentful paint after was around like 2.6, 2.8, around that zone after the rehaul. So just a quick recap. So we created a Next.js server an Apollo GraphQL server, and the monolith has whatever the remaining things it had. And we created Cloudflare workers to route all our incoming traffic to the dedicated servers that we wanted to go. And just a few replatforming takeaways. Like with this new architecture, we had like an easier to maintain code base in terms of a new tech stack. And it was easier to form purpose-driven teams around the new architecture. And the deployments were independent of each other. Now we have like a front-end stack and a back-end stack. And we also have had a phased approach to a revamp. So after getting a success on this particular launch, it was easier for us to like convince stakeholders that, hey, we are like planning to like revamp our other pages too for our desktop and also make it responsive. So those kind of things. So there were a few transient challenges. Like it was really easy to like work on this new stack, but at the same time, we still had to update code in like kind of like 3 different places to begin with. But the advantages of the new stack kind of like shine brighter than the negatives we had, and making the servers communicate with each other could be like really daunting because we have to like have an eye out on all the metadata and the cookies that the monolith requires to make it functional. And running 3 app servers on local dev environment was one of them. This was one of the things that we were dealing with. But around early 2022, though, we kind of got rid of Apollo GraphQL server, and mainly because we found this like really interesting library called SWR, stale while revalidate. So the NextJS team at Vercel like launched this hook. So we kind of like adopted that, and we used that for fetching all our data, and also combined that with TypeScript. So we actually didn't want the Apollo GraphQL layer anymore because like all we needed was already being provided by this one library with all the fancy caching strategies that it came with, like from cache and like network only and all those things. So currently we have the monolithic app reminder, which is functioning as an API layer predominantly, and the Cloudflare workers. So we kind of like got rid of, towards the end, early 2022, we kind of like got rid of the GraphQL layer since we adopted SWR and TypeScript. And well, with that being said, I hope this talk was like helped you in a way to understand like how a legacy code base can be revamped. And I hope you guys also take a few baby steps in your current existing legacy code base to update yours and gain all these benefits. So anyways, that's all, folks. Thank you so much.
Let's give it up for Nawaz. Thank you so much. Very insightful talk. And you know what? This would be fun if you just stay here for just 1 second. Wouldn't it be fun if we did a selfie and y'all just like went crazy in the audience behind us? Ready? 1, 2, 3. Woo! That would be fun. That's one for the Twitters. All right. So I'd like to invite our next speaker to get set up while I provide an introduction for him, just to reduce the awkwardness. So if you have any questions for Nawaz, just please write them down, hold them. We're going to talk about them. You can ask them at the topic tables afterwards. And, it's really easy to come and see the talks and head out, but I would strongly encourage you to stay. The whole networking part is one of the best aspects of the meetups, the events, the conferences, the hallway track, I remember when I went to my first hackathon, I ended up connecting with these two folks named Berkeley Martinez and Quincy Larson. And one of the rewards for going to this hackathon was we got like free co-working space, and in San Francisco, that is like, it's very valuable real estate. And I ended up watching him build Free Code Camp. And how many of you know Free Code Camp? Yeah, incredible. How many of you did Free Code Camp help you get your career to where you are right now? All right, there's like 5 or 6 of you raising your hands. Yeah, so big thank you. Exactly. Our next speaker as well is a graduate, I guess, of Free Code Camp. I don't know if you say it. I don't know if they're using that term yet. Yeah. Also a donor, since they are a 501c3 nonprofit. So feel free to donate to them. They are friends. They don't pay me to say that. I just really love what they do and what their mission is. But our next speaker, y'all know him, Shawn Swyx Wang. If you don't follow him on Twitter, please do. I don't know how he can't speak tonight. I don't know how he finds time to code with all the tweeting he does, because it's a gold mine there. So give him a follow at Swyx on Twitter. I believe it's at Swyx pretty much everywhere else, but I'm sure he'll tell you. So please give a rousing round of applause for Shawn Swyx Wang.
Thank you. Is this live? Thanks very much for that very kind intro. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, I wasn't planning to give this talk. I was just here for work reasons, and then Ben just randomly DM'd me, and he was like, "We're holding a meetup. Do you want to speak?" And sure, I'll come up with something. So this is on my mind recently. If you're here, you probably saw it on the invite. So we're just going to talk about Deno versus Bun. Deno or Deno? I think it is Deno. Anyway, so an important disclaimer first. This is a talk by an outsider who hasn't built anything real with either project. So I think that's important to acknowledge because your level of experience should be disclosed up front, but it shouldn't prevent you from sharing what you know so far, especially when the project is 8 days old and, and no one's really built anything real with it. But I still think that's the kind of stuff that you want to share at a meetup, and then we can just talk about it. That's really it. I'm not an expert. I spent a bunch of time on it, and I'm sharing with you the results so far. Okay, disclaimer away, I'll just speak authoritatively from now on. So 3 years ago, I talked about the third age of JavaScript. It was a blog post that did really, really well. And what I did essentially was trace the history of JavaScript and the major events and color code it by 4 different color codes. Red would be the standardization, which is ES1, 4, 5, 6, and now we're not even keeping track because they're every year. Blue would be user land libraries. Orange would be build tools. And then green was the runtimes. And the runtimes was increasingly telling the story about the places that JavaScript could run. So Chrome was started in 2007, Node.js in 2009, Electron 2013, React Native 2015, Hermes and Deno 2019, 2020. So just increasingly JavaScript is just spreading all over the place like a, I don't know, virus. And we have some experience with that. And I thought I was done actually, because Hermes was a very niche JavaScript runtime. And if you don't know, that's Facebook's custom Android runtime to run React Native on Android. It specifically made a JS engine just for that. And I was like, all right, this is kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. But the third age of JavaScript is essentially a thesis about generational shifts based on a few things. I went into more detail at Reactathon, which is the conference that Ben organized, which was amazing, and the venue was just incredible. So you can see that talk online if you wish. But here we're going to update the third age of JavaScript for 2022 with the newest runtime, Bun. All right. So first of all, I think a very important JavaScript principle is don't fix what isn't broke. And I think a number of people you should start off this conversation with some valued skepticism about this attempt to replace Node.js. Like, what's wrong with it? Like, it's working fine. And really, like, you should listen. Probably the best person to think about that is its creator, Ryan Dahl, who in the last JSConf ever, JSConf EU ever, he actually came on and announced Deno. And he actually talks about a few design mistakes in Node. You can watch the video for more, but he said not sticking to promises because he introduced the error callback continuation passing style, a paradigm that you're used to in Node.js. Security build system using Node.jip If you had ever had any issues in Node.js, that's his fault. Having packaged JSON, node modules, require module, and index.js. All of these were like minor little, like it got really minor, and he thought it was basically too cute. Like he was like, you know, these are just like quality of life improvements that actually made Node significantly more complex and harder to debug. Later on, he actually wrote more thoughts on Deno versus Node.js. So if you want to, you can read his latest, most updated thoughts on Deno versus Node.js in there. I won't read the slides to you. The table of contents, or what we're going to cover in this talk today, it's a very difficult talk to do. It's one of the hardest talks I had to prepare for, just because it's not like I built anything production. There's so much moving pieces. There's a lot of information to process. So what I think the best service I can do for you, if you're watching, is essentially do a what is, like a from the ground up introduction, talk about what they share in common, because they are similar and competing projects, and then talk about what's different and what is the generalized feature that you should start looking for, the patterns. Meaning if a third or a fourth or a fifth JavaScript runtime came out, what are the patterns that are likely to repeat, irrespective of the actual implementation? Like these are the things that people want, or the universe is pulling from the JavaScript community. So Deno, that's a little screenshot of the GitHub over there. It's got some really impressive stats, 84,000 stars, 721 contributors, which is ridiculous. And it's mostly written in Rust with a healthy smattering of JavaScript and TypeScript. It's been around for 4 years. It was announced in May 2018 at that JSConf EU. And exactly 2 years later, Deno 1.0 was released. And then there's been a really interesting evolution since then as a venture-backed company. That is one major departure for Node.js as well. It used to be just kind of like a open source governance body, and now it's an actual venture-backed startup. So 2021 got the seed round, in 2022 got the Series A. A lot of interesting milestones in between. I think I'll highlight to you that Deno is on TC39. It actually is in production at Slack, Supabase, and Netlify. And there's a lot of Hacker News buzz about it. So really, really interesting project. And already 4 years of history behind it. Bun, in comparison, launched 8 days ago. Already 24,000 stars. Used by contributors 88. That contributor counts. I'll show you a little bit of story behind that. Another interesting thing to note about Bun is that it's 60% written in Zig. And like a year ago, I didn't even know what Zig was. And apparently it's a even safer replacement for Rust. I don't know anything about it. I choose not to know anything about it. But I think it's a very interesting evolution of the thesis that most of our JavaScript tooling is going to have some kind of systems language at its core to optimize the hot path and scripting shell for you to have an interface that JavaScript developers can use. Bun's marketing is almost entirely based on speed. Everything is just speed. So server RPS, 260,000 requests per second on macOS, 20 times faster installs. Bun can bundle over 1 million lines of JavaScript. I think when like these numbers in and of itself, like are a little bit hard to face, but once you start doing hard comparisons and benchmarks with other runtimes, like npm start or Bun start or Deno start, Bun is 2 times faster than Deno and 4.5 times faster than Node 16. And it also has some impressive stats for SSR tests and foreign function interfaces, which by the way, was one of the regrets. We talked about JIP being one of the issues there. Ryan in his sort of recap was like, if I just waited to get the foreign function interface right, we wouldn't have to use that. I think the one GIF I can actually show you is this one. So this is kind of how the test runner is marketed. That's the test suite on React, and that's the kind of speed that he's trying to go for. So again, just be aware that this is marketing. These are the tests that he's written, and there are a lot of tests that are not written. And this is a unit test library that there's a bunch of unit tests that may not be reflective of your testing experience, but it does include a test runner, which is more than what Node.js does right now. Okay, so yeah, so on top of all the speed claims, I think the 3 that he chose to focus on for marketing Bun was essentially 3 of them: server-side rendering React, loading a huge table for SQLite, and then foreign function interfaces. All of them conveniently faster than all the competitors. I think this is where you start to have to think to yourself, like, what do you actually want out of a JavaScript runtime? Which is a ridiculous question because 2 years ago, you probably didn't really think about anything. You just like, Node.js is the be all and end all, but now you have a choice. And so do you actually want to server-side render React a lot? Or do you actually want to load a huge table a lot? Like, is that important to you compared to the other things that you have to trade off to get there? So common features between Bun and Deno, of course, run locally, and that's nothing new. I still think that's important. You still want to be able to run and then to deploy the exact same code. HTTP2 support, ESM HTTP imports. This one actually may not be true for Bun. I realized that retroactively. They never actually said that they committed to this. Web APIs, that's an increasingly marketable feature, I guess, which is we view like the node specific APIs for fetching and sockets and the rest of the stuff as a mistake, and that we should try to, as much as possible, stick to the browser interfaces that are a standard. Environment variables, like if you just put in a .env, put your environment variables in a .env file, you don't need a separate package to read that. It just comes with the runtime immediately. Out of the box TypeScript and JavaScript support. So even though standards-wise, TC39 has not really standardized TypeScript or JavaScript, both Bun and Deno have gone ahead and just formalized it anyway. Foreign function interfaces as an option to interop with other languages, and then combined tools. So both runtimes now come with task runners and package managers, linters, formatters, bundlers, and test runners. So just a really, really comprehensive tool set for the new age of JavaScript. Deno's advantages. These are the unique things I can find about Deno. So one, at its core, it runs a V8 isolate, which means you can attach Chrome DevTools. It's got its own file system and server APIs, not that hard to learn. It's designed by the same guy that designed Node.js. It's got web APIs, including, very interestingly, location, as in the URL path, web storage, and workers for threading, which is also super interesting. Permission APIs you may not have seen before because Node.js had no consideration of security. But here you can actually pause for, let me see, how do I click this? So imagine if you can pause for permission. When you're writing a CLI program, you can pause for permission and decide to ask for it. So you can ask for your user to grant you permissions and wait until that person grants you permissions or to cancel. So that is just a nice security, so that by default it doesn't have access to your file system, and you don't have like a crypto miner as you install packages or run CLIs. DocsGen, it generates docs for you to well-known formats. It itself has really great docs. One of the most interesting examples I really like. And by the way, I'll show you this running in the future. It's got really nice snippets that you can copy and paste from. It's got really nice example demos that you can do full stack apps with. And I think this is a really well thought through thing. It's got a meta framework that's really well received. Sorry, called Fresh. This is essentially the NextJS of Deno. The primary advantage is this trendy thing called island-based client hydration. In other words, I saw you shaking your head over there. I was like, what the hell is that? By default, most server-side rendering frameworks, including NextJS, they render out the HTML, send the HTML over, then they send the whole JavaScript over, and they render out the exact same thing entirely in React and then swap it out, right? When none of this changes. All of this is JavaScript weight that's being sent over the wire, but it doesn't change. You just have to send the whole thing again for it to be consistent. So the theory of island-based client hydration is, well, we know that none of this changes, so why are we sending that again? You just send the HTML and you're done. No JavaScript beyond that. The only JavaScript that you should send is the stuff that you need to be interactive. That's the island right there. So there are a bunch of other projects that are also involved in that. And if you want to read more, Islands Architecture is the blog post to learn about that by Jason Miller. So it's like these should be interactive. So they're the islands of interactivity. The rest, HTML, no, we'll just not send it. Makes a lot of sense, but it's obviously a lot more complex when it comes to bundling and server-side rendering. Okay, so What else? It's got language server protocols, all that juicy autocomplete and intelligence, code intelligence inside of your IDE. Deno already has that as part of it. You can run Deno embedded in a Rust app. So if you have a Rust app and you want to offer JavaScript execution, you can just chuck Deno in there. It has a nice third-party ecosystem that's sort of governed by sort of the Deno hosting service. But you can, I mean, it's kind of optional. You can choose to host with them if you want, or you can choose your own registry. It's really up to you. And that's part of the benefit of ESM HTTP imports. I can't believe I just said 2 acronyms back to back. One thing I really do like is essentially there's also a standard library. We often knock JavaScript for not having a standard library, but now we have well-documented, like you can see the source and you can sort of browse through the standard library of Deno. Let's look at one like datetime. It's all automatically documented from TypeScript. This is server-side rendered docs from the source. And you can get like is leap or difference between 2 dates, that kind of stuff. It comes with a full set of standard libraries. This is a bug. He needs to fix that, but essentially there's, you can format strings, you can do file systems, you can do streams. There's all sorts of good stuff that isn't even documented yet, just because it's just so massive. There's such a massive project. And also you have node polyfills. So when you're converting a project from Node.js to Deno, you might find this useful. I don't think it's fully complete. You can see all the partly compatible issues there, but there's some attempt at node compatibility. You can even run Deno to Node. So the argument is, if you just write a Deno compatible package, this Deno to Node tool will make it also usable in Node.js. So your starting point should always just be in Deno, because that's the superset of you can run everywhere. There's a CLI, which we won't go into, and then there's Discord. Okay. Next, the bigger Deno advantage is that there is a venture-backed company, remember, and a hosting service and a cloud service. And that's called Deno Deploy. Every time you deploy a Deno project, it fans out to 34 regions and it's served from the edge location that is closest to your user. There's a playground editor for you to edit your projects, as well as Git integration. Every single deploy is atomic, and you can roll back just by changing your pointers. In fact, upgrading a preview URL to a production URL is just a matter of changing pointers. Like there is no redeploy, there's no rebuild step. It's that fast. There's organization support, which is good for professional usage. Automatic compression, runtime sockets. This one's interesting. Broadcast channel, which is a lesser known API for communicating between tabs in a browser. They've co-opted that to communicate between regions. So if you need to do, if you have some kind of like global chat app or something and you need to talk between all the regions, you can use that. I think I should demo it a little bit because I feel like I've been showing you a bunch of slides. So this is Deno, dash.deno.com/new. It's got a whole bunch of different little things. So you can select your own GitHub repos and just deploy it right there. Or you can just choose from one of these. Let's just choose the hello world and deploy it. And that's serving a little hello world server. And you can take this URL. Go ahead and try it. Take this URL and try it out. So it's lightsnail72. I don't know if I can edit that. Sorry, use React. Let's just go there. All right, we're camping out on the useReact server. So go ahead and try that. Do you all get a hello world? Yeah? Yes? Does anyone have their phone up? Yep, I see thumbs up. All right, and I'm gonna change it to hello Deno, and I'm gonna save and deploy. All right, go ahead and reload. We got hello Deno. That's the redeploy step. Like that's it. Because there's no build step, because it's all ES modules, because it's tightly integrated between Deno and Deno deploy. Like it's a really nice experience. I even like that they have included. So let's go back a little bit to the project. I even like that they've included a JSX example with Tailwind. Because like everything that we've done is in JavaScript. How do you include CSS in there? Honestly, I think they cheated a bit, because essentially what they've done is they included a copy of Tailwind on request whenever they see some Tailwind stuff. But yeah, Tailwind right here. So let me just change this to text red 200. Is that? I hope I got that. Is that? Yeah. So that's Tailwind. Can I get us just a rough poll? There's like maybe like 40, 50 people here. What percent of you, who uses Tailwind? Who would like Tailwind? It's about 50%. Nice. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the default CSS for React or anything that I use nowadays. Anyway, so it's super impressive integrated environment with the cloud, right? Like, and deploys directly. Like, there's a lot of like, Ryan just runs his own blog just based off of this, and it's pretty impressive. Okay, there's more planned for Deno deploy, but yeah, I mean, it's just a far more progressed. It's a very impressive cloud service, and I was very impressed when I saw it. All right, let's go into Bun. So Bun's main thing, apart from the speed, is Node.js compatibility. You should be able to take most of your Node.js based projects, and people have tried it for NextJS, Remix, and Swellkit, and be able to port it over to Bun relatively easily. Sometimes you may need an adapter specifically for certain frameworks, but that's the whole point. It's compatible with the npm package registry, and it's compatible with Node libraries. And so, you know, one of the downsides of Deno is that they just decided to break compatibility completely. They were just like, we made all these mistakes 10 years ago. we're not beholden to them. Bun is trying to do that. Bun is bending over backwards to do that and to be fast. It's also got built-in SQLite for simple little database, and it's got extra bundling support. So when I looked at the docs for Deno's bundling, it didn't really support CSS. Like, you know, importing something.css, that's actually CSS modules. Like, it didn't really support that. And it's got a much smaller ecosystem. There's a small attempt at an Express.js equivalent called Bao.js, because Bao is the Chinese for Bun. So it's, again, speed marketing, and it's very early days. There are temporary downsides. So there's no API reference. The docs is just a giant README. That's the docs. And when I tried to deploy it, I was the first person to file the issue. How do you deploy Bun? Oh my God. And these are the Docker files. And I think the collective eventually arrived at this is the way you deploy Bun. Yeah, just a lot of Docker foo needed to get this going. So yeah, very, very early stage. I mean, I have no doubt they were going to solve this, right? And same for this, like for Deno, you can brew install Deno. Bun, you have to curl with sudo, and then just pipe it straight to bash. Like, that's just not secure at all. And NextJS is kind of partial. So these are temporary, right? Like, they're going to get fixed, like, not important. The main thing is prove the speed, right? Bun SQLite is interesting. It's the first time I've seen, you know, Node.js, you're just used to not having persistence. You can just write to a file. I guess that's kind of it. But here there's embedded SQLite. And I think that's a fantastic use case of SQLite. And now we all have to learn SQL, which I don't think is a downside. All right, let's talk about the contributors. Deno is a community. Bun is a one-man show. That's what the charts show over there. So I mean, I think you should think about the governance carefully about the projects that you adopt. Deno not only has governance and a core team worked out, they have the benefit of 10 years of Node behind them in order to do this. Whereas Bun is one person's side project. Well, sorry, I take that back. Bun is one person's project, and he hasn't really worked out the core contributor team part. So the race is on. Deno's been around for 4 years, and that's the star chart graph. And Bun has gone vertical, but that's after a lot of marketing for the launch. So he executed that launch really well. We don't really know what this will look like in 3 or 4 years. And there's one more player on the way. It's kind of weird for me to say that there's one more player that's coming soon, because Cloudflare Workers actually was announced 5 years ago, but they were not open source. And so in comparison, nobody's really adopted it as much, or you can't really use them as a runtime locally. So, but they have an interesting innovation, which is they have Workers KV, Workers Durable Objects. Well, so Workers KV is for eventually consistent stores. You just get and set as a KV store. And then for durable objects, you declare a durable object, and this is strongly consistent persistent storage. And then on top of those things, they built D1, which is their embedded SQLite option. So what will 2025 look like? A few hours ago, I actually tweeted out a poll for just like where people are at. So most people do not have an opinion, which is very smart. But some people, the rest of them, 70% of people will happily tell you their opinion anyway. So 29 people, 29% Bun, 18% Cloudflare workers, 21% Cloudflare workers, and 18% Deno, which is kind of sad for Deno for working for 4 years and then now being third place in terms of the straw poll. But this is not scientific anyway. But what is for sure is that the thesis of collapsed layers is happening. The fact I like to throw out to people is that word processors, when they first came out, did not come with, this is a blog post by Benedict Evans, check it out. It's a fantastic blog post. Word processors, when they came out, did not have footnotes, did not have word counts, did not have horizontal print layouts, because all those were plugins. You had to buy them separately for like $30, $50 a pop, and then plug it into your word processor, because that was not the job of the word processor. Now, 50 years on, like we know that that's the part of the job, and now that just kind of ships all together. Like all these functionality used to be plugins. And I think essentially what's the same thing's happening to JavaScript tooling. And 10 years ago, all of these tools used to come separately. We used to believe in the Unix philosophy of every tool should do one thing well. But now we just realize that all of these tools are just needed in every single setup. So we should have one opinionated set of tools that come together and work well together. So the collapsed layers thesis, Deno actually has something on their docs to show this, to map things you know versus the Deno equivalent. So for example, ESLint is now DenoLint, Prettier is now Deno format, TypeDoc is DenoDoc, Jest is now DenoTest. What else is interesting? I just really like they have docsgen. Like, can you imagine your runtime like caring so much about docs that they that they generate this for you? Where's DenoDoc? Oh yeah, TypeDoc right there. Okay, all right, cool. Bun, again, the docs are not there, but if you go through all the instructions, you're like, okay, this is the equivalent. So they don't have nearly as much functionality, but also they're much younger. Second thing after the collapsed layers thing is that probably edge-first rendering and databases will be a thing. Like you will want this for your users because it just makes sense to serve them as quickly as possible. One of the interesting tweets I saw from today talking about Bun was like, this is the first time, I live in India, this is the first time a page is loaded under 1 second for me. And that's just because it was served from the edge. We should make this a norm. And we should render from the edge as much as possible. And that's something that Deno definitely strongly believes in. Bun does, and by the way, Deno deploy is an edge-first story. Bun is not. Bun is a single binary that you probably run on a server somewhere. There is no edge runtime that they have worked out yet. But it's probably very likely that is their next step. They're just 4 years behind. What else? Yeah, so you want this to be your availability zone instead of having to choose one location. You just want to deploy everywhere at once. Third opinion, JavaScript containers, which is essentially, we used to ship VMs, then we shipped containers, and now we ship isolates. And every time you do that, you have order of magnitude improvement in cold start time, and you have order of magnitude improvements in the amount of, the number of instances per physical machine, and therefore order of magnitude improvement in the cost. And this is the first time, my first observation of this happened when Netlify shipped their sort of pricing for the Deno functions capability that they had, and Deno functions are cheaper than normal functions. And this is unusual if you're familiar with AWS function pricing. AWS Lambda at edge is 3 times more expensive than AWS Lambda. So this is an inversion from edge being more expensive to edge being cheaper. I think it went from like 3 times more expensive to 25 times cheaper. That's a 75x improvement because of this stuff. So you really want to think about, like, a lot of people push back on this. If you read the Hacker News post on this, Hacker News comments on this blog post, they were like, yeah, I mean, like, if you believe JavaScript is the future, then yes, you can go ahead and strip out everything else. So those are the people who are not betting on JavaScript. But if you agree that you should always bet on JavaScript, then this is the future. And the final opinion is FSAS, which is functions as a service, meaning what if every tech company could let you have a programmable edge? And that is essentially what Deno is doing. That's their go-to-market. Deno has a functionality called sub-hosting, where essentially they offer you the ability to offer programmable workers to your customers. The Slack actually has this. Where is the Slack API? They call this flexible automation for everyone. And basically, they let you write functions that run within Slack that doesn't really have a server, but it's actually Deno under the hood. So imagine if you could program the edge of every single app. That is kind of the promise. And I think that is my last slide. So yeah, that's it. If you want more from me, I run a DevTools blog, DX Tips. I have a personal blog, and then I have a book for career advice. Follow these projects, deno.com and bun.sh. And thanks very much.
Give it up for Swyx. Do you want to do Q&A or do you want to save that?
I'll take a couple questions if anyone has.
Any questions?
Answered every question preemptively.
Okay.
I see a couple thumbs up. Yeah, we'll chat in the topic tables. Thank you.
All right,
Thank you, Shawn.
one more time, let's give it up for Swyx.
And for Nawaz too, everybody.
Oh.
Yeah, this has been quite the return to in-person meetups, hasn't it?
Thank you for calling me.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I hope you guys have had a lot of fun. But we still got another hour. So I think we still got food out there. We still got drinks. And we're going to do topic tables. So if you want to come chat with Swyx or Nawaz or Donovan or the Yext team, come hang out with us there. We'll be hanging there for about another hour.
So thanks everybody for coming, but don't go home. We'll see you out there.
All right. Thanks, everyone.